Well, friends, the New York baseball teams are very, very, very good, much to the dismay of 28 other fan bases who are sick and tired of hearing Mets and Yankees fans complain when their team is bad. Well, now those teams are amazing. The Mets and Yankees have the two best records in baseball. But my friend Jake Mintz, which of them is better? We got to figure this out, right? It's June. We have to decide this right now.
If you can make it here, you can win baseball games anywhere. So we're going to go position by position, little tail of the tape action, and see whether the Yankees or the Mets match up better against one another. Now, time will tell who's actually better, but we're going to tell you right now. Let's start at catcher, which is easily the worst position for both of these teams. No one really inspires all that much confidence. We've got Jose Trevino and Kyle Higashioka against Tomas Nido and sometimes James McCann.
Yeah, this is a weird one. You know, Patrick Mazeika also kind of in that mix with the Mets. I don't particularly feel great about either of them, but I'm going to lean Yankees here, considering Trevino has at least hit a little bit. We know his framing is elite. It's mostly defense on both sides here, but I'm gonna lean Yankees and just honestly say that I miss Gary Sanchez. That's kind of where I'm at on the catchers.
Gary Sanchez better than all of this group by a mile. Let's move on to first base. We've got Polar Bear Pete Alonso against Anthony Rizzo for the Yankees.
Yeah, I think, earlier in the season, Rizzo was leading the league in homers, and I think Rizzo's been great for them and clearly been a huge move for them to bring him back. But the ceiling is still much higher with Pete, and Pete has been excellent. I think Pete is honestly moving into underrated territory, and I take Pete here. Do you agree?
100% agree. Rizzo is a short porch king, but again, you play half your games away from the short porch. Pete can go yard in any stadium. I do think Pete is also perfect for the Mets vibes. When the Mets are good, Pete is great. Second base, very interesting one. Jeff McNeil against Gleyber Torres. Torres has taken a huge step forward this year after a down 2021, as has McNeil. Both of these guys were not great last season, but they are back to being borderline all-star caliber players this time around.
Yeah, it's a weird comparison. I know. I guess I was probably more worried about McNeil just considering he's much older after last year, but it's tough. I lean Gleyber here considering the strides he's taken and the strikeouts are down. He's hitting the ball much harder, and his defense, as bad as it was at short, is very good at second base. So I lean Gleyber slightly, even if we're just talking about for this year. Certainly long term, I still believe that Gleyber could be an all-star, but I wouldn't argue if you take McNeil. This is really, really close.
I would lean McNeil because of the dead balls. Now, maybe the balls are alive again. Who really knows? McNeil's skill set, a lot more contact, high batting average, less power, less dependence on the ball carrying over the fence, makes me just lean him slightly. He's been hitting better than Gleyber as of late.
Yeah.
So let's just call this a wash.
Yeah.
We'll call it a wash.
It's pretty even. But again, I know there's some McNeil defenders that are going to be pretty mad about that. All right, let's slide over to third base. And this is another interesting comparison. Two off-season additions, Eduardo Escobar at third for the Mets and Josh Donaldson at third for the Yankees. Now, the first thing to point out, Donaldson has, been hurt and has been playing some DH, but we're gonna count him as a third baseman here. But I'm gonna go with Escobar on the basis of two main things. One is that he doesn't get hurt, unlike Donaldson. He's a few years younger, and he is very durable. I love that he's a switch hitter. I love that he's a solid defender. And just from a vibe standpoint, he is as good as it gets, whereas Donaldson has obviously already had a few issues off the field this year that have made him a little bit less desirable. But this one is close. I go Escobar here. What do you think?
Actually, Jordan, those issues were technically on the field. I don't know if you saw exactly what Donaldson was doing. But yeah, Eduardo Escobar they're the opposite ends of the teammate spectrum. Everybody who's ever been around Eduardo Escobar is that's the best dude in the world. And Donaldson is very much the opposite of that. Sure. And when they're very close, right? They're very, not similar players in terms of how they play, but overall value, I think it will equal out to about the same if you assume that Donaldson will miss a chunk of time, which I think you can assume that he will continue to do. So I will agree with you. I'll lean Escobar by a nose.
Yes. Let's go to shortstop. This one is a pretty easy call. We're going to go with the $300 million Francisco Lindor face of the franchise. Sorry. I mean, maybe there's an alternate reality where the Yankees did spend $1 billion on Correa or whoever, but they didn't. It's IKF, and IKF has been solid, if unspectacular, but this isn't much of a discussion. We're taking Lindor.
This is the biggest no duh.
All right, let's move out to the outfield, and this is a little bit more debatable. Now, here's one obvious thing. I'm going to take that Aaron Judge guy first.
Yes, please.
Among this group. But if we're just picking 3 outfielders among all the Mets and Yankees outfielders, who would we pick? Again, who are we considering here? Obviously, Judge. He's our first pick. That's not complicated. Then you got Aaron Hicks and Joey Gallo out there. And then for the Mets, Mark Canha, Starling Marte, and then Brandon Nimmo in center field. I know McNeil's played some left, but we're counting him for second base. And Stanton, too, we're going to count him to DH. We'll get to him in a second. So of that rest of that group after Judge, how would you line those up?
Got to put Judge in right, no duh. I would then put Nimmo in center, and I would probably take Canha in left. Starling Marte, I'd rather have him than Canha. He has played more right field, and I don't think has played any left field. And thank you, but no thank you in regards to the other Yankees outfielders not named Aaron Judge. So yeah, do you agree with that? Nimmo,
yeah, I agree.
Judge.
And I love Joey Gallo, and I hope he turns it around. But right now, there's no way you can take him. Even he's a good right fielder too. I could also see an argument for maybe Nimmo in left and Judge in center and Marte in right, something along those lines. But I agree. I think Canha, Marte is pretty close, and Nimmo has been sensational this season. So I think he has to be pretty clearly the second pick of this bunch.
So that's 2 for the Mets and 1 for the Yankees. Moving to DH, this one's also a no contest. JD Davis is cute, and he's a exit velo darling, but he's going up against the exit velo god, Giancarlo Stanton. Not even a question. Nobody hits the ball harder on planet Earth than this guy. Even when he's struggling, he's better than you think he is. Let's not even talk about it. Let's move on.
Nope. Easy check for the Yankees.
Yeah. To the bench. The bench is important, right? It's not just the best 9 players on your team. It's usually the best 15. And we're going to give the edge here to the Yankees just because they have DJ LeMahieu, that extra infielder on the bench. Sometimes it's Donaldson, sometimes it's Glaber, but whomever it is, they're probably better than Luis Guillorme, even though Guillorme has been outstanding so far this season.
Yeah, Guillorme's been amazing, and he's obviously a great defender, and he's been playing a lot of seconds, getting a lot of starts, and so. But track record wise and just overall value, I think we still have to go with the Yankees. Not to mention, I just wrote about this. You can read about this on FoxSports.com. Matt Carpenter. Oh my God. I mean, he's been sensational, and he's been more than just a nice lefty bench bat. He's slugging like 900. So I think Carpenter also helps give that edge over the Yankees. Look, all respect to Travis Jankowski. He has certainly proven his worth on the Mets bench, but I'm still taking the Yankees bench right now over the Mets.
Starting pitching. This one's a bit more complicated, right? Now, when I say who are the Mets starting pitchers, you can kind of say Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer, but you also can't because they've been hurt for a bit. deGrom all year, Scherzer the last month or so. And their timetable for return is kind of cloudy, as it seemingly always is with deGrom. So we're going to have to go and evaluate the Mets starting rotation as it is right now, which means no Scherzer, no deGrom, and no Tyler McGill, which leaves us with a pretty lackluster group who has performed well above their skis and has done very admirably for the Mets. That being said, the Yankees probably have the best rotation in baseball so far 2022.
Yeah, I mean, strictly on performance, they absolutely do. And I know that these are names that we're already used to seeing. Of course, the biggest change is Nestor Cortes Jr. becoming a Cy Young candidate out of nowhere. But the performances of Montgomery and Taillon, and most importantly, Severino, who is healthy and looking fantastic, means that the Yankees are just the answer. Now, if we're picking them like we're picking the outfield, right, how many of the guys are we taking over each other? I think Bassett would probably make this Yankees rotation over maybe a Taillon or a Montgomery. But other than that, you're taking Cole, you're taking Cortez, you're taking Severino, this version of Severino that's healthy. And I also think we have to, speaking of health, let's just give a little extra credit to the Yankees. None of those guys have missed basically a single start, which is really, really impressive and has obviously gone a long way towards the Yankees' success. So credit to the Mets guys that have stepped in, the David Petersons, Trevor Williams of the world. Carrasco has been solid, but I just feel like we have to, this is a pretty clear, at least 4 points to the Yankees.
4-1. Let's move on to the bullpen. Again, super weird. Neither of these teams have a particularly dominant bullpen for the two teams that literally have the best records in baseball. Aroldis Chapman and Jonathan Loaisiga both hurt and not very good for the Yankees. And then the Mets, you know, Trevor May's been out. Edwin Diaz has been incredible. Drew Smith was phenomenal to start the year, but since then he's really tailed off. For me, this is a wash.
Yeah, it's really close. I mean, if you cancel out Holmes and Diaz, I mean, Holmes has been, of course, one of the three best relievers in baseball. Diaz has been good, but he hasn't been as good as Holmes. And then you're kind of getting into those swing guys, you know, the Michael Kings of the world. Is Michael King more valuable than Lugo? Like, it's close. There are all a lot of similarities. I'd probably lean Wandy over Joely, but I might lean Drew Smith over, you know, Miguel Castro. It is very, very, very close. Obviously, neither of these bullpens are at full strength right now. But again, I think we got to go wash here. It's hard to say. Maybe you could say I don't know. I think a couple weeks ago I might have. I don't know what I would have said. This one is probably the closest one. I'm really not sure.
Yeah, even, wash, tie, 1 point to each side. Let's move on to the managers.
Yep.
Aaron Boone and Buck Showalter. Aaron Boone has been skippering the Yanks for a while now. He never really exudes much confidence, but the team always wins. And then at the end of every year, Yankees fans go, enough. And then he comes back and then they win again. Buck Showalter, on the other hand, is a newbie in New York. Well, kind of, sort of, not really.
Yeah.
And he's been given a lot of credit for kind of righting the ship with the Mets and making them less Metsy. I would lean Showalter because he seems like he knows what he's doing all the time. And that's just like so much of being a manager.
Yeah. Yeah, June is probably not the time to be judging managers, unless I guess you're the Phillies. But I just feel like, of course, like the make and break here is not going to happen until, you know, the DS. So I don't really feel like I think it's close. I lean Buck too. I think we all love Buck. I think Boone probably gets more hate than he deserves. But again, when you're winning this many games, you're probably looking like you're doing well, and you probably are doing something right. So. I think it's also pretty close, but I think we lean Buck there, and I think most people would agree with us. All right, but then last thing, and most importantly when we do these discussions, who's better? Well, it's a vibe check, all right? Now, again, these are the teams with the best records in baseball. But right now, if you had to pick which team's vibes are better, I also don't know. But what are you leaning one direction?
I'm always leaning one direction, Jordan. One of the best bands of all time. But in regards to the conversation at hand, I think it's a wash. I'm always worried about the Mets, right? Even though it's kind of like a different group of guys, there's always a possibility that the bottom just completely falls out of the boat. With the Yankees, I don't have that same sense. I do think that if I had to pick like what team I'd want to be on right now, like to have fun, I think it would be the Mets, because it is a new, fresh group of guys that seem to be gelling really well.
Right.
Whereas the Yankees, it is like all the guys who've been together for a long time playing well.
Yep.
So I would lean the Mets by a hair, but again, both of these teams are just riding high right now.
Yeah, again, the adversity has been at yes, they've dealt with injuries, but generally, however you're doing it, when you're winning this many games, the adversity is at a low here. So, all right, that's our tail of the tape between our two New York teams. Feels like we're leaning slightly towards the Yankees as it stands now, but maybe we'll have to do this again in a month or 2 months or 3 months, or if we have another Subway Series in October. We'll see. For more on the Yankees, the Mets, and all the wonderful teams in Major League Baseball, make sure you're checking us out on foxsports.com and on the Fox Sports app. I'm Jordan Shusterman. That's Jake Mintz, and those are the Yankees and the Mets.